Oh, Jeremy Corbyn. Hey!
Right, Jeremy Corbyn, where do we start? Now, in so many ways, Corbyn is very good news because it certainly drags things further to the left. My entire life I've never known a left-wing Labour Party. The first time I ever had the chance to vote was in 1997, it was for Tony Blair, and I wasn't going down that road, so I've only ever known New Labour. So it's certainly refreshing to see Labour going back to what you could call their roots. And I came pretty close to voting for Corbyn in the general election this year, and I even publicly stated on Facebook that I was going to do it, and then very, very quickly changed my mind. I didn't feel good about it at all, given the way that Labour have acted towards the independence movement in the last few years. They've called us everything, they've called us Nazis, they've called us fascists.
There's no difference between those who try to divide us on the basis of whether we're English or Scottish and those who try to divide us on the basis of our background, race or religion.
And I thought, no, I can't endorse that. Secondly, a vote in Scotland for Labour is not a vote for Jeremy Corbyn, it's a vote for Scottish Labour.
Kezia Dugdale, leader of Scottish Labour, just a month ago you wrote, Jeremy Corbyn cannot appeal to a broad enough section of voters to win a general election. Do you stand by that?
Which is a very different thing. And even Corbyn's people know that Scottish Labour has a very different flavour than Labour in England. And I was not prepared to endorse Scottish Labour because I knew what would happen was they would interpret my vote as a unionist vote.
And it looks like a very difficult night for a party that couldn't really decide, was this an election about Brexit or an election about a second independence referendum? It's certainly done huge damage to those people arguing for a second independence referendum.
It's a vote against independence. Because Scottish Labour were never going to go round the houses going, oh, we hear you voted Labour, but do you still intend to vote yes in future? Oh, that's fine, we'll not count your vote. They're like, well, that's a unionist vote now. So that's exactly what happened. It was interpreted as an anti-independence vote, and I couldn't allow them to do that.
There is one problem with Jeremy Corbyn. In the end, he is a unionist. Why are you a unionist?
Well, you know, nobody has said that to me in Scotland.
Jeremy Corbyn is softer in Scottish independence than I think a lot of his contemporaries have been and are, but he's certainly not in favour of Scottish independence. I would like to see him putting out much more positive noises about working with the independence movement and working with the SNP specifically. But like Ed Miliband, he said before the general election, I won't be doing any deals with the SNP, even although the SNP said that they would like to work with Corbyn. And it's like, well, that's not being reciprocated, so why should I endorse you? What we also have to bear in mind, as much as Labour activists were cock-a-hoop about the general election result, and it's certainly broadly good news that Theresa May lost her majority and that Labour came close to winning the election, is the fundamental thing that all these Labour activists have missed is that the most energised and spirited Labour campaign in which they've returned to traditional Labour values, the most energised Labour campaign I've ever seen, that almost even tempted me, couldn't beat the most shambolic Tory campaign we've ever seen.
Nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. We are offering a long-term solution for the sustainable...
And that for me is a fundamental issue. So when I'm being told we have to put our faith in the UK and a socialist Corbyn government, I can understand the appeal of that. But all the predictions before the general election about Corbyn being unelectable, although they were clearly exaggerated, they turned out to be right. So why would I put my faith in a party that has lost the last 3 UK general elections and deprioritised Scottish independence, which we're very close to achieving? Why would I do that? Why would I put my trust in the English electorate to make the right decision on Scotland's behalf when it's proven time and time again that that just doesn't happen? So I'm glad I didn't vote for Corbyn. I understand why many yes voters did, and I'm certainly not going to criticise them for it, but I'm glad I didn't vote. And actually, since then, some of the statements that we've seen Corbyn come out with, he's in favour of a hard Brexit, which puts him in the same policy position as the Tories. He's against the free movement of people.
Would you like to see us leave the single market? You can't tell us.
The single market is dependent on membership of the EU.
You support the renewal of the Trident deterrent.
It's there in the programme, and therefore it's
So what I asked you, Mr Corbyn, do you support the renewal of Trident?
I voted against the renewal of it. Everybody knows that, because I wanted to go in a different direction. That is a decision that's been taken. I respect that decision.
If you look at Corbyn's position in Trident, admirably, he's said that he's no in favour of Trident, right? So I'll give him that due, and he's defended that position on television very well. But that's not the position of the members in his party. So the Labour Party has to maintain the renewal of Trident, because that's a party position. But then he completely flips that on its head when it comes to Brexit. So he must be aware that the vast majority of Labour members, certainly Labour activists, and certainly the left, you know, Momentum, the Corbynistas, are in favour of Remain. And yet he's pursuing a hard Brexit. So he's perfectly prepared to override the politics of his members and activists when it comes to Brexit, but he's not prepared to override the politics of his members and activists when it comes to Trident. So he can't have it both ways.
You would still like to see a united Ireland now?
As for the Irish people to decide, my own view is historically Ireland, yes.
The contradiction with Corbyn in Scotland is shared throughout the whole Labour movement, which is that they're in favour of independence for every nation in the world, especially small nations, except Scotland. Now, that to me is very revealing. So the internationalist argument, the left-wing argument, first of all is in tatters because of Brexit, because it's clear, given that Scotland voted to remain, and given that most people in the independence movement, or most people who voted yes, are in favour of staying in Europe. That proves to me that it's an internationalist movement anyway. But that idea that Corbyn is in favour of independence for the Republic of Ireland, possibly even the reunification of Ireland, so, you know, removing part of British territory and reunifying it with Ireland, that he seems to be fine with. But Scotland becoming independent is anathema to him. And that doesn't make any sense to me. How can you be in favour of independence for every country in the world except the one right on your border? And what that suggests to me is either they don't see Scotland as a country at all, it's just a part of Britain, it's just a region, and in which case I wish they'd just be honest about that. You know, if that's your position, that's your position. You know, we'll know what we're dealing with when we hear people put forward that position. Scotland's not a country. But they pretend that Scotland is a country for all purposes except the idea of being able to make its own political and economic decisions. So that suggests to me, first of all, a contradiction, second of all, the idea that Scotland's not a country, and third of all, an underlying British nationalism, which is completely invisible to them. Because at all costs, the structural integrity of Britain must not be tampered with. Britain has to be the organisational unit for the workers. It has to be Britain. And we're now starting to hear a British jobs for British workers put forward. That argument that was put forward by Gordon Brown, now being put forward by Corbyn. There is an underlying British nationalism within the Labour movement that they are completely unaware of, because they train all their fire on Scottish nationalism. Well, that's nationalism, we can have nothing to do with that. But when you unpick their various arguments about why they don't want Scotland to be independent, it comes down to British nationalism. But even I can see that Labour are a left-wing party. But nonetheless, the idea that the structural integrity of the UK must be held together at all costs, even to the point of denying the democratic will of the Scottish people in that parliament right there, that suggests to me that there are contradictions within the Labour movement that they're not even intellectually aware of. And I can't believe they don't even see it.